Hello and welcome to another episode of Joe and Kat Chats. Oh my goodness. It's an episode about 2020. It's a year in review. We're going to talk about all sorts of things. My goodness. How are you, Joe?
You know what, Kat? I'm still here. I'm still alive, still black, still hydrated, still moisturized, still educated, and
Nice.
trying to make sense out of everything that has happened this year. 2020, everything that we thought was going to happen didn't happen, and everything that we never thought would happen did happen. And that's essentially the best way I can summarize 2020, in addition to how we are going to talk about many of the events that took place in 2020, stuff that we remember vividly, stuff that we forgot about, and stuff that we're going to refresh your memories on, because that's what we do here at the Joe and Kat Chats. We're here to provide that socio-political and socioeconomic education that everybody wants and desires and needs so fervently and wants so badly. So that's what we're here for. Amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it even any better. I'm doing well. I couldn't say it any better. We were bombarded with news this year that was just mind-blowing over and over and over again. And so it's an interesting thing to sort of be able to review that and be able to look forward, because I think that there is a lot of stuff that's holding people back right now.
Agreed.
Clearly, pandemic, we're not doing what we thought we were going to do. But I think there's also something to be said about having a moment to reflect and be able to talk about these things that are ongoing, that we are just going to have to keep pushing and fighting for or against, depending on what it is. So yeah, let's get into it.
Absolutely. And I said this in a chat a couple of weeks ago, and I said, the aim of this show and these conversations is to raise the horizon of aspiration and deepen the well of inspiration. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands the kind of the genesis of where these conversations came about. It was really a response to the uprisings that were happening in the spring of 2020. And you put the word out. You were like, hey, you know what? Who wants to talk about this stuff? And of course, I was like, hey, look, I like talking and I like to talk about stuff, considering I was doing my thing with the Live and Direct Chat series. And then you were like, hey, you know what? Let's do this again. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's do it again. So we kept doing it. And what we've done with the previous 28 episodes is what we've hoped to do is to provide some more information, to advance the dialogue and come up with some solutions that address the injustices that adversely affect the four fights. And we know those four fights well at this point: the fight for humanity, the fight for freedom, the fight for equality, and the fight for survival. So, these conversations, sure, there's a little bit of planning involved. We take notes here and there, but other than the little bit of notes that we have with each episode, these are real conversations, and these conversations reflect our humanity. And I just want to make sure that everybody that's watching right now or will watch or is in the chat live right now understands that everybody is a human being. Everybody has their right to be heard. And if you feel that you are not being heard or you're not being listened to, you can come to either of us, because censorship is wrong, not being heard is wrong, being ignored is wrong. And we want to make sure that we provide this space as a safe space and a safe place for dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I very much agree, as you know. And yeah, it is interesting to sort of reflect on how this began. It was just sort of a random call out to say, like, I have some shit to say, because it's not okay that more Black men and Black women are being murdered by police officers for no reason. And so, yeah, I think it's grown into something that both of us really enjoy, whether other people watch or not. I mean, that is what it is. But we do appreciate those who do watch. We want these dialogues to feel like we're having a conversation with everyone that gets to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And you're right, we don't prepare a lot because we just want it to be an organic conversation. And I think that that is something that is lacking in a lot of these really emotionally charged topics that we choose to talk about every week.
Absolutely.
And so, I really appreciate that we've been able to make this space, and we're planning on continuing.
Absolutely.
So if anyone has any questions, we're live.
We're live.
We're live.
Definitely. And something you said, and I think this is a perfect segue into where we're going to go today. You said so eloquently, I might add, that you said, you know what, this was a response to seeing Black men and Black women being killed in the streets by white police officers. And so much of the I guess the birth of our conversations that we've been having every week, and many of the protests have come as a result of Black Lives Matter. And there have been, unfortunately, one person being killed by police is too many. We've had hundreds, but some of them have been a bit more noteworthy than others, given the graphic nature of the killings. I'm not even going to say the murders or no killings, because they were killed by police officers. I would be remiss if I did not start the conversation with George Floyd. Everybody saw that happen. It was there for the world to see, and for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, there's 3 police officers from Minneapolis, Minnesota, killed George Floyd, all because George Floyd was trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill. And at the time, George Floyd had COVID-19. He had COVID-19. Breonna Taylor, 26-year-old medic who was in bed with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend hears a knock at the door thinking the house is going to get broken into. He calls the police. They shoot. He shoots. Breonna Taylor gets killed. And then none of the police officers go to jail. What about Rayshard Brooks? He's in a Wendy's parking lot getting a burger and fries. He has a mental health episode. Next thing you know, the cops are like, yo, okay, well, hold on. What's happening here? And they kill him. Daniel Prude, Rochester, New York. Jonathan Price, Wolf City, Texas. A couple of events that took place around this time last year. Elijah McClain from Denver, Colorado, violin player. Beautiful young man, killed. John Neville, who was killed by police by a chokehold in my home, one of the places I used to live, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Casey Goodson and his friend Andre Hill, 2 16-year-olds killed by police. Benny Edwards killed by police in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Dijon Kizzy, young kid out of Los Angeles. David McAtee, also killed in Louisville, Kentucky. And he was a store owner who was protecting his store during the Breonna Taylor riots. And then cops killed him. Wallace Jr., I don't know if anybody remembers this. He was the brother out of Philadelphia. And he had a knife in his hands. And the mother was like, hey, look, don't shoot him. Let me deal with him. Let me take care of him. And the cops gunned him down anyway. What about Jacob Blake just out in Kenosha, Wisconsin? Shot 7 times in the back. What about Javier Ordonez from Bogota, Colombia? 41-year-old lawyer. Killed via chokehold by police. Cedric Chouvait from Paris. Father of 5 of Algerian descent. Again, killed by police. And I said this in a previous chat with Richard, Mayman Ranch. I said the same. Cedric Chouvait said, Je suis folk. Mm-hmm. And then Javier Ordonez said, no me agoando. And then George Floyd said, I can't breathe. And those other 2 languages, what they both said was the same thing George Floyd did just before they died. I can't breathe. And so much of everything that has happened around the world has just been far more than just coronavirus. It's also been police violence and the proliferation of militarized police, not just in the United States and in Colombia and in Canada and in France, but around the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. And our condolences to the families of those folks who had family members be murdered and subsequently did not get justice. Because that's the additional part of these murders. When police get away with murdering people, it creates a climate like we have now, and absolutely we need to keep fighting for justice for these folks, because they did not deserve to die at the hands of a public servant.
No, they didn't deserve to die. And additionally, when we talk about people not deserving to die, there's been over 300,000 people in the United States that have died from coronavirus. There's been, I think, approaching at least, a couple of million people around the world that have died as a result of coronavirus. And if the United States and Canada and world leaders have invested more in public health, and instead of shutting down hospitals and spending that money on building jails and detention centers, build more public health facilities, build more hospitals, have more hospital beds, have hospital supplies ready to go in case another pandemic or epidemic in certain instances happens.
Yeah.
World leaders around the world, for the most part, have failed their constituencies.
Yes, absolutely.
Constituencies. And when we talk about people that didn't deserve to die as a result of police genocide, because that is what it is, it's police genocide.
Yeah.
The biological warfare that has happened against 300,000 people in the United States and a couple of million people around the world, and I think 20 or 30 million people that have been infected, could have been curtailed, avoided, and remedied if governments were actually doing what they were supposed to be doing for their citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would take it even further in the sense that you say we need to focus on medical care, but there's certain places in the world, particularly the United States, because I know that system, as it's more familiar to me as an example. Like, we need to change the structure of that in order to change the mentality behind why and how people get healthcare. Because when we operate under the current system, it's capitalistic, which means that it's exploitative in nature. And so the protection and the care and the health of the people who are trying to get help, the patients themselves, are being impacted by that. And we talked about this last week. So if anyone's curious about, more information about that, check out last week's episode.
Absolutely. And in last week's episode, I said as much towards the end of the episode, where I mentioned former presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, where Marianne Williamson said that the United States does not have a healthcare system. The United States has a sick care system, where in order to maintain the status quo, or the three-legged stool model of healthcare that is the United States healthcare system, based upon a law that was celebrated its 10th year anniversary this year, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, you need sick people in order to uphold that system.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, like in Canada, for example, where Canada focuses on preventive care and wellness, the United States focuses on the defensive practice of medicine and makes sure that we have just enough sick people to keep the system moving. That way, healthcare companies and health insurance organizations can continue to reap record profits, while 80 to 90 million people remain uninsured or underinsured.
Yes. Yeah, and this absolutely goes back to the Black Lives Matter movement too. When we're, when we're saying defund the police, that means we want to take the money that the police get and put it into things that are going to make human beings be able to live their lives a little bit better. And so when you said, you need sick people in order for this system to function, like, you need criminals for the police system to function. That's why there's so many private jails, and there's, all of these issues that come along with that. And that's why, we talked about it in, one of the episodes, I think long ago, the 13th Amendment. It's a way for the system that we've set up to benefit rich white men, basically, to, continue segregation and to continue the slavery of Black and brown people in the United States and Canada. It's the same here. It's just Yeah.
Absolutely. I know we've mentioned the 13th Amendment in our first episode. I know we mentioned it in the colonialism episode. I'm
Mhm.
sure we mentioned the 13th Amendment in the voting episode. And I'm almost positive we mentioned the 13th Amendment in the capitalism and human development index episode. I'm sure
Yeah.
we mentioned in those episodes. And for those who are uninformed or just don't know, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the United States, but there's a clause in the 13th Amendment that says, yep, hey, you're no longer a slave unless you commit a crime.
Yeah, exactly. So you jail the Black people. That's what happened. And
Yeah,
it's still ongoing. And that's exactly what the system is built on. That's why we want to defund the police. We want to defund, prison system. And really, the ultimate goal, I think, for the BLM movement and those of us who are fighting for justice, abolition is really the ultimate goal. We want to
absolutely.
abolish the police and abolish prisons.
Exactly. Shut it down
Yeah.
completely. Shut it all down. Shut it all down. And when we talk about specifically the United States and we talk about world and geopolitics, there's a lot that happened in geopolitics this year. I think most notably, first and foremost, not to sound ethnocentric, but it was a big deal. The United States elections were a big deal.
Yeah.
They were a big deal. And you saw loads of conversation about who was going to get elected, who was going to be the Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States.
Yeah.
Were there going to be any other viable parties involved that could dethrone the duopoly that is the United States electoral system? What about the debates and COVID-19 safety and regulations? Did Joe Biden actually have dementia? Did Donald Trump risk getting many of his staff sick because he unknowingly or allegedly unknowingly had the coronavirus? What happens when you have a stimulus package that doesn't get approved for months and the largest transfer of wealth in human history happens legally with the CARES Act and the HEROES Act after that? So the United States elections were a huge deal. And I think we will be remiss if we talk about the United States, we would have to discuss what's happening with the United Kingdom, the country of my birth and one of the other countries I had citizenship in. The United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, and that we're recording this show on December 29. By December 31 at 0000 hours, midnight, or actually January 1 at 0000 hours,
Mm-hmm.
the European Union will no longer have the United Kingdom as one of its members. What are the political ramifications and implications of that? If you watch enough BBC News or France 24 or Al Jazeera, you'll really get an idea of what's happening with Brexit and everything that's happening with the UK leaving the EU.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is a big deal. It's been coming up for a while now, and there's a lot of implications and I mean, I don't know specifically. I haven't been paying attention to the news very well, so
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on, and it's going to cripple a lot of folks that were reliant on that alliance or association with the EU.
Absolutely. There are all sorts of trade deals. There's all sorts of educational opportunities that are now going to be denied to not only UK residents trying to go to school in mainland European countries, but vice versa. UK students from other European countries trying to get educated in some of the UK schools. It's going to be an interesting situation to see how that moves forward. China and their massive new security laws and how it's essentially given huge surveillance powers over Hong Kong. And we're seeing the resulting protests of that. Poland's president, Andrzej Duda, won a second term by a very slim majority. Croatian prime minister, a gentleman named Andrej Plenković, and I say that again, Andrej Plenković. He won victory for the Conservative Party in a parliamentary vote. Bolivia, the new leader of MAS, the Movement for Socialism Party, Luis Arce, who was Evo Morales' longtime, I think, finance minister, if I'm not mistaken, won the election. He won the election. The president of Mali, Boubacar Keita, was arrested. So was his prime minister. and the soldiers, the Malian army essentially took over the government. They said, hey, you know what? We're not electing anybody. We run shit here. This is ours now. This is ours. The situation in Belarus with Lukashenko, who has become who is essentially a dictator in the European Union, and there's protest about the election integrity. The situation that took place in Kyrgyzstan, and I don't know if you remember the situation that took place in Kyrgyzstan, but what happened in Kyrgyzstan was the prime minister quit. The prime minister was just like, you know what, I'm done with this. So then the opposition party, the opposition to the prime minister of Kyrgyzstan, and if you give me a second, I can tell you the gentleman's name because I'm the type of brother that likes to take notes and writes things down. It's Surumbe Jinbekov.
Okay.
Surumbe Jinbekov. He resigned after violent protests. He was like, you know what, this is crazy. I've had enough of this. I'm done. Now, the acting president was a gentleman named Cedric Chouvait, and his claim to fame was being in prison for attempting to kidnap his political opposition. And while these protests were taking place, Chouvait got released from prison. That happened. Crazy but true. And now Chouvait wants to go ahead and change the Kyrgyzstani constitution so he can be elected president, because the Kyrgyzstan constitution prohibits a caretaker leader from overseeing elections that they're a part of.
Yeah, I mean, this is the interesting thing with this is it's just sort of reminding me that, like, you know, these news stories, these elections, you know, I don't know, dramas or happenstances or things that happened are so wild, yet we're all so desensitized because of all the other wild things that have happened this year.
Of course.
2020's been just full of news that is just unbelievable, and we just have to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. It's so unbelievable that's like, wow, there's no way this actually happened, but it actually did happen. That's exactly why I said in the beginning of the show, everything that we never thought was going to happen happened, and everything that we thought wasn't going to happen did happen. Because there's no way you would ever look, if that situation in Kyrgyzstan was a script in Hollywood, no studio would take that on. Like, nah, come on, no way, get out of here. All right, presidents resign. Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, we get it. But the acting president in jail for kidnapping a political opponent? Okay, yeah, maybe, kind of. But then he gets out of jail during the protest? Come on, no way. And now he wants to rewrite the Constitution? Please. Yeah. I mean, look at the situation in Venezuela with Juan Guaido, who was a Trump installment, and the elections between him and Nicolas Maduro. Yeah. Look at the situation in Uganda with the longtime leader Yoweri Museveni and a musician who is a man of the people, a gentleman named Bobi Wine. And if you know anything about what's happening in Uganda right now, journalists are being shot and in some cases killed while trying to report the situation in Uganda. Uganda has actively curtailed internet access to prevent worldwide global journalism from documenting what is happening. Many of Bobi Wine was arrested several times this year. The Ugandan government, Museveni's government, has gone ahead and said, "Hey, you know what? Oh, we're gonna ban rallies and protests. We're gonna ban rallies and protests. But if it's a protest or a rally for Museveni, it's all good. But it's for Bobi Wine, no, we can't do that. We can't do that." Several of Bobi Wine's supporters have been shot by Museveni's people. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Look at the situation that took place in Russia with Vladimir Putin, I think, changed the constitution. So he now is going to be the leader of Russia until 2036. The year is 2020. So my man had 16 years as leader of Russia. Look at the situation that took place in Hungary with one of the most right-wing leaders in the world, Viktor Orban, where Viktor Orban said, "Oh, you know what? Hey, because of this COVID-19, I'm dissolving parliament. I'm the man in charge. Forget a group of people, a parliament, or any of that. What I say goes. I'm ruling by fiat." Think about that. This is what's happening around in a lot of in a bunch of countries right now. And when we circle, and I think, isn't the Canadian elections next year? Are they next year?
Not necessarily. They haven't called one. We're suspecting that there will be one next year, but it doesn't have to happen until like 4 years from 2019.
So
So
2023.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Because it's an issue. I mean, that's something I think we need to be taking a look at. It's something we need to take a look at. And when we talk, and let's not forget, Chile had they completely rewrote their constitution this year. There are protests in Tunisia where they said, hey, you know what, we're rewriting our constitution. We're doing this all over again. So what we're seeing right now, and I think something that we're going to talk about in our next episode will be the first episode of 2021, and it's going to be we've titled it "The Future and Beyond." I'm sorry, "The Future Moving Forward." That's what it's called, "The Future Moving Forward."
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about a lot of what we're gonna to borrow a phrase from a sports talk show host, and I forget which one I heard this from. He said, "We're going to rub the crystal keg and see what's on tap." We're going to rub the crystal keg and see what's on tap.
Amazing.
And that's what we're going to do with the next episode. We're going to rub that crystal keg and see what's on tap for 2021. Because there's some stuff that I think is going to happen in 2021 that we're not going to see coming. But seeing as how we have a certain level of intelligence and clairvoyance, and we're going to use our powers of prediction and deductive reasoning to figure out what we think is going to happen for 2021. That way you all can make some proper decisions about your lives moving forward, and you can rescue some meaning from your lives at this point.
Yeah, and I think just after going through all of the things that happened this year, I think it's also just a really important thing to be able to provide folks with, actionable things, because so much like unbelievable stuff has happened this year. And so for me, it's really important that I want to be able to say, okay, all this like wacky stuff has happened. Like, how do we move forward? How do we push for the things that we need as citizens of our countries, as citizens of our communities, as citizens of the world? Because I think that 2020 really demonstrated, the challenges we have. And so I want to just move forward and highlight, I guess, the things that we can do and the things we can change, because that's what we need. We've been saying it since day one. We need to change the world we live in, and we can only do that with the help of our communities, both locally all the way to globally.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I want to get to a couple of people in the chat because we've got some messages here. After Richard William Gale, our main man, Rant, saying live and direct, as usual. That's what we do here. Still moisturized. You already know what it is.
Hello,
after my man
everyone.
Eugene. After Eugene leads England. What's good, Eugene? What's good? Eugene coming out saying, "What a year." I agree.
Yeah.
My man Granule Bey saying, "Merhaba, merhaba, brother, merhaba." He's from Istanbul, Turkey. Merhaba is it's actually the same word in Arabic. Merhaba in Turkish and in Arabic means hello or greetings.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us, everyone. That's amazing.
Tell your friends, tell your people. We're here.
It's true.
We're here. We're here. And Kat, I want to kind of transition into the next thing, because we talked about geopolitics and many of these leaders of these countries, and I use leaders with air quotes because given everything we talked about, it's how many of their constituents, how many of these leaders have not really done anything for their constituents. A lot of heads of state caught COVID-19.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Donald Trump got COVID-19.
Yeah, very true.
Prime Minister of your country, Justin Trudeau, got COVID-19. He isolated for 14 days because his wife got COVID-19.
Yeah.
Leader of France, Emmanuel Macron, he got COVID-19. Leader of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, he got COVID-19. Boris Johnson in England, he caught COVID-19. And he almost died. And then he gave a speech thanking the NHS, the National Health Service, for saving his life. And again, if we want to talk about one of the things we need to change in the United States is the healthcare system. And look at how well the British healthcare system works. It saved Boris Johnson's life. Saved Boris Johnson's life. Yet there's 300,000 people that have died in the United States because they either had inadequate or non-existent healthcare. And many millions of more people in the United States don't have health care. We need Medicare for all. And we'll talk about something that I'm going to be involved in this weekend involving Medicare for all, because I don't want to derail the conversation and get sidetracked.
That's fair. I'll ask you about it closer to the end.
You can ask. I'll remember. I like staying on the straight and narrow. Janine Áñez, who was the former president of Bolivia, who lost the election to Luis Arce. Mm-hmm. She got COVID. The first world leader to get COVID and die was a gentleman named Ambrose Dlamini. You're like, who is Ambrose Dlamini? Ambrose Dlamini is the prime minister of Eswatini. Eswatini was formerly known as Swaziland, which is a country in southern Africa. Actually, I think borders South Africa from the north. Okay. He died from COVID complications 2 weeks ago, December 13th, 2020. And his lieutenant prime minister is now taken over. I can't remember the brother's name, but he's taken over. The former president of Burundi, a gentleman named Pierre Nkurunziza, he died of COVID this year. There was the current, I think, Home Minister of India, who is essentially second in command to Narendra Modi. He caught COVID this year. He's still alive. He survived. He made it through. There was a high-ranking official in the Australian government, who I think a foreign minister. He got COVID. The French finance minister got COVID. Obviously, the first lady of the United States, Melania Trump, got COVID. The first lady of France, Brigitte Macron, she caught COVID. So you're seeing that COVID is not necessarily limited to just a wet market in Wuhan, China, or over a couple of million people in the United States, or I guess 15 to 20 million around the world. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic status, what sort of political clout that you have, how much money you have, or what your socioeconomic status is. This COVID-19 pandemic, the coronavirus, has been real, and it's been affecting people across the world.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying that viruses are non-discriminatory in the sense that like anybody can get it, it can spread to anyone, no matter what our differences are that we manufacture for ourselves and define by ourselves and our identities and all the things. Like we need to be really careful. I mean, in Canada particularly right now, it's really scary. The numbers are really high. They're triple of what they were at the scariest point in the first wave in the spring of this year. And so people are, we need to really, really hunker down and, follow the rules, wear your mask everywhere, wash your hands frequently. We have to resist that human contact that we crave so much. It's really tough. And I think that that's what's made the year so difficult, is because not only are all of these, geopolitical and political things going on that are so important to be paying attention to and to be talking about, but it's been sort of peppered in with this sense of uncertainty, and that's stressful. We're stressed, and that's like not good for our health. And so, that ties into all the other things we talk about, is like when you're stressed out, your mental health, your physical health, they get impacted. And so, people can go back and listen to our episodes on healthcare and things, and on vaccine, and medical, like the healthcare communication, and things like that. Like we like to tie things together because I truly think that everything is connected and interconnected. And one of the words that I love, intersectional.
Oh boy, yes. How about yes? Woo! Absolutely.
Like episode 3 of Joe and Kat Chats, I think.
It absolutely was. It absolutely was. It was intersectional. And we talk about global leaders getting COVID. There's a lot of other global issues that took place outside of just politics that need to be mentioned. Let's not forget the explosion that took place in Lebanon.
Right.
The explosion that took place in Lebanon. Their economy is destroyed, completely shattered. Joblessness might be approaching 40% or more. Lebanon. They've had 3 prime ministers within the past 12 months.
Right.
Lebanon. Let's not forget the numerous terror attacks that have taken place in France. We can spend the next 10 minutes discussing all the craziness that has happened in France this year, with the terror attack and the beheading of a teacher named Samuel Paty, who was beheaded by a Chechen refugee named Abdullah Anzorov. Was a Chechen refugee. Nobody knew, he wasn't on anybody's radar. He showed, and Samuel Paty, the teacher, showed images of Charlie Hebdo in a classroom. And this Chechen refugee went ahead and beheaded Samuel Paty in the front of the classroom. France has had COVID curfews. France has had a couple of different other terror attacks. France has had the situation with Michel Jecler, who was the black music producer, who was beaten up by police officers. And then the police tried to lie about it and said, oh no, we were assaulted. But then the videotape came out about it. And then there were 150,000 people in France marching against a French security law that the French government wanted to implement to make sure that filming the police during police interactions would be illegal. That happened in France this year. What about the fires, the Lesbos fires on the islands of Lesbos, where there's a major refugee camp? And the refugee situation is still ongoing. And many of these refugees in Lesbos can't stay there anymore because of the fire. So now the European Union Council is saying, hey, look, we need to spread out these refugees across all of the member states. And Poland was like, no, we don't want to be involved in this. And Hungary, obviously, Hungary was like, no, we don't. No, we're not doing this. Let's not forget Hungary, when the Syrian refugee crisis was really in full swing about 5 years ago, Hungary decided to build a fence around most of its borders.
Yeah.
That is not much. In fact, that is no different than about almost 4 years ago, a world leader looking into a camera and saying, I'm going to build a wall, a great big wall, and I'm going to have Mexico pay for it.
Right.
There's really not much difference between what Viktor Orban has done and what Trump actually did. If there's, we mentioned Kyrgyzstan, I mentioned the situation in Venezuela. We could talk about so many of the natural disasters that have taken place in concert with the political upheaval that we've seen across the world. The earthquake that took place in Turkey, major earthquake. The earthquake that took place in Greece. The typhoon that took place in the Philippines. The Atlantic hurricane season. Let's not forget that when the Atlantic hurricane, the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they're the people in basically oversee weather stuff in the United States. And every year they come up with a list of names for hurricanes. Every year. And once they run out of names, they start going to Greek letters. They were about 9 or 10 letters into the Greek alphabet this year. It's the most named hurricanes they've ever had on record. And when we talk about hurricanes and the typhoons in the Philippines and the fires, the wildfires that burnt Australia, and the scenes of apocalypse that we saw in California and Oregon and Washington and southern parts of British Columbia that are still going on right now.
Still
and
ongoing.
The fires that took place in Colorado earlier this year, and Mt Kilimanjaro being on fire.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this in a future episode. The environment, the eco side is happening as we speak, and we must do something globally, not just locally, but obviously you want to start locally, but globally to address climate change. Because if that the world keeps going the way we're going, we as a species will not exist much longer than we have now.
Yeah, I think that that is something that has been on my mind a lot recently. And like you say, we're going to do an episode on that in the coming weeks. But it's interesting to me because it seemed like nobody was talking about that anymore. Once the COVID-19 pandemic sort of took hold with all around the world. And so we don't realize, but there's all these weather events happening. Hurricanes, fires, earthquakes are examples of these things that, these are directly a result of the climate crisis, in the sense that they're increasing in frequency and severity. And you just said the Atlantic had the worst hurricane season in history.
Ever.
So there's increasing frequency, increasing severity just in that example. And so so I think this is a really important topic that we need to cover. But yeah, it's been ongoing, and people have been affected by more than just the pandemic this year. It's displacement is a huge thing.
Displacement is a huge situation. And let's not forget, there was also, when we talked about earthquakes, there was a magnitude 7.7 earthquake that struck Cuba earlier this year.
Right, yeah.
Do you remember that? And it was a huge deal. And the aftershocks were so strong that office buildings in Miami were evacuated. Yeah. I'm going to say that again. The earthquake took place in Cuba, and about 90 miles away is the southern tip of Florida. I think Key West is about 90 miles away. Then about a couple of hours, then an hour and a half, 2 hours north is Miami. Office buildings in Miami were evacuated. Think about that. And if we're going to talk about earthquakes, there's been, and again, we're filming this episode on December 29, 2020. Earlier today, there was an earthquake in Croatia in a town called Petrinja. I think, let me say that one more time. Petrinja. And Petrinja is about 50 kilometers away from the capital city of Zagreb. And this is their second earthquake they've had in 2 days. Today's earthquake was a 6.5 on the Richter scale. 6.5 on the Richter scale. As you probably already know, I have loads of friends in that part of the world, in the former Yugoslavia. And I've reached out to several of them already. A couple of them have written back and said, yeah, and they're in Zagreb. And a couple of them were like, we felt the building shake a little bit. A couple of buildings got damaged. The town of Petrinja suffered a lot of damage and a lot of trauma as a result of the war 30 years ago. And they were just kind of getting everything rebuilt and organized again. And now this. Yeah. Now this. And let's not forget, right around the time when the pandemic took place, there was an earthquake in Croatia, and it struck in Zagreb, a city that I know quite well. And loads of buildings got damaged. Plenty of people got hurt. So when we talk about, global warming, look at how freezing cold the United States is. Freezing cold. There have been frost warnings as far south as southern Florida that are freezing or below freezing.
Yeah.
And that's unprecedented. People in Miami are walking around with winter jackets like, wait a minute, what am I doing with this winter jacket? I live in Miami.
Yeah.
So it's an issue. It's a problem. The environment is a huge deal, and we need to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And immediately.
And immediately is not soon enough.
It's not soon enough, exactly. We should have done something about it long ago. But as we've discussed before, the interests of the elite and the capitalistic system that we uphold is a big contributor to prevention of that. And then, of course, the lobbyists.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And let's not forget, there were wildfires in Argentina.
Yeah.
Large swaths of fields in Argentina burned, gone. And Brazil, my gosh, yes, the Amazon. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
The Amazon, I remember a quote during those Brazil fires where someone, in reference to the Amazon, called the Amazon the lungs of the earth. Mm-hmm. The lungs of the earth, because of the amount of trees and other vegetation that exists in the Amazon rainforest, and how it essentially provides clean, breathable air, not just for Brazil, but for the world.
Yeah.
And thousands of acres of Amazon rainforest were burning every single day. Every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. And, some of the other global conflicts that I know we didn't mention earlier, but I want to make sure I mention the situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Right. Yeah.
My gosh. I mean, let's take a look at that. The protest of 1/4 billion people, 250 million Indians said, you know what? We're on strike. We're shutting this whole thing down. We're not doing anything. And that strike hit 1 month yesterday, December 28, 2020. Yeah. 1 month. And they haven't budged. They're not moving.
This strike in India right now is a big one, and it is one that we need to be keeping an eye on. It's really important. It's for the farmers, and farmers globally should be paying attention and providing support for these protesters, because they are what keep us alive, and they are the most important people in our world.
Yes. I mean,
because they're the ones that can help prevent us from getting sick too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, in my opinion, farmers are really, really the most important people, because they provide sustenance for us.
Yeah. And look, and it's not just farmers, but Indian farmers, because I love good Indian food now. Basmati rice is nice. Chana masala is wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Naan, samosas. Okay.
Yum.
All right. It's a real thing, but it's not just farmers in India that should be going on strike. How about farmers in the United States that should be going on strike?
Exactly. Yeah,
especially I think when the supply chain has been completely destroyed and farmers are having to destroy their crops because of an inadequate logistics system in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something we could talk about in a future episode as well. But yeah, I agree. I think that when I expressed that, it was like, let's get everyone, all the farmers, going with this strike, because it is so important, and we have similar problems in our countries. So the farmers here and the farmers, across the globe, that aren't in India, we all need to unite on this, because it is so important. And farmers have long been exploited, and they're usually the bottom of the proverbial totem pole, as far as they do not get paid, as well as the middlemen in our food industry and the food structure and all the sorts of things. So
exactly.
So there's a lot to be said, but I do encourage everyone that pays attention to these episodes. Anyone that hears us, please look into this protest in India, because we need to be joining them and showing solidarity, which is something we find very important. We've talked about before as well.
Absolutely have talked about solidarity, and it's something that I've mentioned on many occasions, and I'll bring it up again. The type of situation that we're seeing in India right now, massive worker strikes, everybody's saying, shut it down. We're not dealing with this. Is the same sort of fervor and energy that we've seen in France for the better part of about 18 months now, with the yellow vest, the gilets jaunes, and the black vest, the gilets noirs movements, yellow vest and black vest. We talked about that in the colonialism episode, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sure we mentioned it in the capitalism and HDI episode also. We need that sort of fervor and energy and fight on a consistent basis in every country that's being screwed by their governments right now. We need that.
All of the countries.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Which is why we've spent so much time talking about geopolitical and global issues, because look how many countries have had some sort of conflict. Mm-hmm. I didn't even talk about the situation that's taking place in Georgia, the protests that are taking place there, or the recent protests that have taken place in Montenegro. I think there were protests taking place in Montenegro last night. Mm-hmm. Last night and this morning, protests against their government. The situations, the the rubber duck revolution taking place in Thailand right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to limit the powers of their monarchy.
Yeah.
So we're seeing it around the world. We're seeing not only citizens stand up for their rights, but we're also seeing more rights for the LGBTQ community. We're seeing that across the board. Costa Rica was the first country in Central, this year this happened. Costa Rica was the first country in Central America to legalize same-sex marriage. That happened. That happened.
Good.
That happened. The country of Gabon, which is a Western African nation, formerly a colony of France, and also gained their independence in 1960. The capital is Libreville. They formerly decriminalized homosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Yeah, okay, being gay or lesbian, you're not going to get killed for that. It's okay. Argentina, today, they're having protests right now against to legalize abortion.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Protests for that, to legalize abortion. Poland, part of the reason why over 150,000 people were in the streets in Poland a couple of months ago, and why many Polish women walked off their jobs and withdrew money from the banks,
Mm-hmm.
was because the Polish the High Court, the Polish version of their Supreme Court said, you know what, we're making abortion illegal. And a whole lot of women said, oh, no. Sorry, we're not dealing with that. We're on strike. We're shutting it down. And if you try to get slick by taking our money out of the banks, we'll get one step ahead of you and we'll take the money out for you. And we can put it under our mattresses and in cookie jars.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And in pillowcases. And then that pair of shoes in the back of the closet that you hardly ever wear. We can put cash there.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Poland's cash is called the Polish zloty, Z-L-O-T-Y.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, women will find a way. Abortion never goes away, whether it's legislated as such or not.
Yeah. And so we're seeing more rights for the LGBTQ community. And this is something that I think we're going to need to talk about in next week's episode, because the LGBTQIA plus, and there's a whole bunch of other letters. And we'll discuss what all of that means in another the follow-up episode to the vocabulary of politics.
Yes.
We'll talk about all of that. That's going to be a whole other set of definitions we're going to provide for everybody, because we like being specific. But for a long time now, the LGBTQ community has not been able to get the same rights and privileges that non-LGBTQ people have been able to receive. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I forget who said this. It was a famous preacher, but I forget which preacher said this. He said that, I'm trying to remember the quote. I think it was, marriage is not a reward for a reward against homosexuality. I forget exactly what the quote was, but the point in the quote was, look, just because you're straight doesn't mean you have to infringe upon rights of those who are not straight. Mm-hmm. And again, we're seeing more and more LGBTQ, the more members of the LGBTQ community get rights, and deservedly so. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. So I think we can talk about that next week. And yeah, that's encouraging. There are some places still that are not good, particularly the places with right-wing or conservative leaders. Uganda comes to mind as one of the worst places in the world to be part of the queer community. So, I mean, there are advances, but we still have a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. But again, in sort of the nature of keeping this a little bit more positive in the last few minutes that we have, one thing is, I mean, the ongoing protests in Hong Kong, they've made a little bit of positive change. They're still going. I mean, that they had a protest on January 1st of 2020, and it was such a huge protest, and the officials cracked down after that, but they've made some positive changes. In Nigeria, there was End SARS protests, and they ended SARS. Yes. They dismantled it, whatever. They got rid of that organization, which is amazing. Some of the folks who were murdered by police in the United States by like through the BLM protests, they have actually gotten a little bit of justice.
Yeah.
Minneapolis, for example, is
Minneapolis.
probably the best place to look into as far as that. And, you know, the climate strike protests, they, I mean, that was global, and the Fridays for Future protests paused, but they adapted and they went online, and it's still a movement that has such great momentum. So if you're able to be online watching us, you can join the Fridays for Future protests as well.
Absolutely. And when you mention SARS, we're not talking about the South Asian respiratory illness, sickness.
Right.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in Nigeria. Just want to make sure we highlight the difference in acronym.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. That's a very important difference.
Huge thing. It's a big thing. It's a big thing. It's a big thing. And, you know, since we're talking respiratory illnesses, and so much of the conversation about this year has been COVID-19 because it is a respiratory illness. And we've had over 300,000 people in the United States die, and, you know, gosh, millions of people around the world that have passed away. We've also had some people pass away that were famous people and rather influential people.
Yeah.
One of Canada's most famous people ever, Alex Trebek, passed away.
Yeah.
Alex Trebek. I mean, Jeopardy's the greatest game show ever, and Alex Trebek is on the short list of greatest game show hosts of all time.
Yeah.
He is. I mean, there's no question about that. Sean Connery, who was the best James Bond ever.
Agreed.
You know, you could keep, you know, Roger Moore was all right. George Lazenby, whatever. Timothy Dalton, okay. Daniel Craig, all right, he's okay. Pierce Brosnan was really good. But Sean Connery was the guy. He passed away. Sir Sean Connery, he passed away.
Yeah.
Kobe Bean Bryant.
Yeah. And his daughter Gianna.
And the other 7 people that passed away in that helicopter crash, I think in late January or early February of this year.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant, who passed away, I think, at 41 years old. And he had just retired. The Lakers retired both of his numbers. Think about that, both of his numbers. And I'm old enough to remember the tail end of his father's basketball career, because my uncle, God rest his soul, he used to live in just in New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia. So he used to take me to Philadelphia 76ers games every once in a while. And Kobe's dad, Jelly Bean Bryant, played on the 76ers. As I'm barely old enough to remember a little bit about Jelly Bean. But yeah, Kobe's one of the greatest basketball players of all time. A few weeks ago, Diego Maradona. Diego Maradona died. And the entire country of Argentina mourned his death for 3 days. The last time they mourned anybody's death for 3 days was Evita Peron. They mourned her death for 7 days.
Right.
They mourned Maradona for 3. The stadium in Naples, Italy, where he played for a football team in Napoli, was what's the thing called the Stadio San Pedro, which means St. Peter's Stadium. They just renamed it after Diego Maradona. Now I want you to really digest this. Italy, a devoutly Catholic country. Vatican City is inside of Italy, which is the head of of Christianity. These people in Naples, Italy, had a church named after St. Peter. And they said, you know what? Nah, we're naming it after Maradona. That's the impact he had.
That's vast. It's incredible.
Unreal.
Oh
we got about 60. We have less than 60 seconds.
I know. I just wanted to quickly mention John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg also.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and our condolences to their families, and we appreciate all of them and all of you, everyone that's watching, everyone that may watch later. Joe, thank you so much for starting this amazing thing.
Hey, it is what it is.
It's been an incredible journey, and we have a lot more to say and a lot more to keep going. So thank you so much
thanks for being open-minded, but more importantly, open-hearted to all of these conversations.
Of course. Same to you.
Absolutely.
All right. Much love,
Love you.
everyone.
You're the best.
Happy New Year.
Peace.